Good afternoon, my name's Dave Norton from Discovering New England History, and we're going to begin a new series here. It's a part of New England, actually part of United States history, that is certainly overlooked and that many actually went through and experienced, called the Cold War. So we'll begin with the first slide. New England and the Cold War. And the Cold War is defined by the period between 1954, right after World War II, and 1974. And we're going to talk specifically about the Nike sites that were placed around New England. And they had two different series of missiles. To begin with, they had the Nike Ajax missile, which is on the lower left. And then that was superseded by the Nike Hercules missile, which is on the right. Very important part of history. Go to the next slide. Oh. Now, here we are. The patch there is a U.S. Army Air Defense Command. And the U.S. Army had to control all these Nike sites, and then it was transferred over after a few years to the Army National Guard sites under each state. And that's a great picture there on the right there. That's my father. He's the second in from the right, and that's the Nike Ajax. And I believe that picture was in the Hartford Courant at the time. He was stationed at the Avon Simsbury Nike site. So it's kind of an interesting period. Actually, my father was in it for 15 years in the National Guard. And during that same time, the last 70s, from 70 to 74, in that period of time, I also served in the military. So we had two from our family that were in the military. My father was a master sergeant in the Nike base, and I was a lieutenant, but I was in the ordnance, something a little bit different. Now, right after World War II, Soviet Union, they closed off Berlin. There's a picture of the actual Berlin Wall, and that's what started off the Cold War. And you can see there's the Kremlin on the right there. The Soviet Union really mobilized and built up the forces then. And they put in all these missile silos over in Russia underground. And here's a picture of two of them, two different shots here. And these are intercontinental ballistic missiles, and with targets aimed at the United States. And they were really gearing up militarily at that point. Now, some of the other features that they had, this picture of a Soviet fighter bomber, MiG-25. They had really far advanced fighter planes at that time. And this is the one that everyone was concerned about, the Soviet Tu-95. It was a turboprop type of a plane, and it carried quite a payload, especially concerned about atomic bombs. And they also had Soviet submarine bases, Soviet submarines patrolling all over the world. And this shows you one of their home bases here. The picture of it on the left there. You look at it and you say, well, gee, it's a normal mountainside next to maybe a river or an ocean. But we're going to go and show you exactly what that's all like. They had it so that it could repel any type of bomb you would drop. There's a Soviet submarine with the red star on it on the right. And if you enter that opening there, it goes right inside a mountain. And on the right there, you can see the sub will go all in there, and you see all the garage doors on the left, on the right, and do complete maintenance overhaul on the Russian submarines. I mean, they had this infrastructure for the ICBMs and for the submarines, which was incredible. And of course, the nuclear submarines they came up with the idea they could actually fire a missile below the waterline in the ocean. And because they were mobile, they were certainly harder to hit than a standard ICBM in a fixed position. And they're all up and down the east coast of the United States. And the Soviet Army really built up. It was one of the largest in the world at that time. And very experienced, because most of the soldiers actually fought in World War II. Now, what are these targets in New England? Why are they interested in this in case there's another war? Well, these are the 6 major targets in New England. Electric Boat, Quonset Point, Rhode Island. Pratt & Whitney Aircraft, East Hartford, Connecticut. Sikorsky Helicopters, Stratford, Connecticut. U.S. Navy Submarine Base, New London, Connecticut. Raytheon, Lexington, Massachusetts, and Electric Boat in Groton, Connecticut. And I'll show you why these were prime targets in case there was a war. Here we're going from left to right. General Dynamics Electric Boat. In the middle, Pratt & Whitney Aircraft. They designed all the jet engines. And Raytheon, they made a lot of missiles. And those are 3 of the prime targets for all these submarines and also these Russian ICBMs. They're also interested in Sikorsky Aircraft, Stratford, Connecticut, Electric Boat, of course, in Groton, Connecticut, and the U.S. Navy Submarine Base at New London. Now, it's amazing how they had transported these ICBMs around. There's a transporter, the rocket on it, and that's on the right. That's what everyone was concerned about back in the day, the atomic bomb, the strength of it. That's an extra photograph of it. They're excellent. Now, the United States, we had ICBMs also. And at that time, early in the Cold War, we had the Atlas missile. And some of the capabilities, the speed was Mach 10, or 10 times the speed of sound. Range was 9,000 miles. The flight ceiling was 40 miles up in the atmosphere. And there's some of the tunnels underneath there and the silos, primarily located out in the Midwest, fixed positions. And there's the actual ICBM Atlas missile, photograph of it over there, the right side here. And the United States Navy, they developed nuclear submarines, and they actually developed submarines that could shoot missiles, Polaris submarine. And they could shoot from underwater, so it's undetected. They fire a missile, and then it can be long gone in the ocean. And here's you can see the Atlas missile that also is capable of an atomic or nuclear warhead. There's how it is when it's launched there on the left. And this was the Cold War. This time period is probably around 1961. So you can see from 1954 when it started to 1961, both the United States and the Soviet Union were mobilizing. Now, in the United States, in case there was an attack by all these Russian bombers or these submarines, everyone had to be aware. What can they do? How can they, if they're hit with all these missiles? Books were established. There's a book over here, How to Survive an Atomic Bomb. And Life magazine on the right, the drive for mass shelters. Everyone in the United States was considering or constructing their own bomb shelters in their backyards. And all the major cities were constructing bomb shelters underneath a lot of the major municipal buildings. And there's a sign right there that was on all these shelter places. And this is a great picture. Backyard bomb shelters. Everybody was doing their own thing, if you will. There's a fella here on the left with his shovel. There's an underground bomb shelter he had. There's a cross section of another one over on the right. You can see the father's opening the door to get in there, and the mother's making the bed underneath there, and just in case they can write out an atomic attack. And I like this one here. Some of you made this drawing here on the left. Shows the whole family involved. So it's your typical residential house, and in their backyard, they're digging it up. The father's digging it up. The son's helping. You can see the mother's carried some of the sheetrock to go inside, and the daughter's helping with the sheetrock. Now, on the right, you can see these had to be stocked because you didn't know how long you were going to be underground if there was an atomic attack. So you can see they got radios, they got batteries, they got trays, they got canned foods, everything to stay alive. And here's another book, Survival Under Atomic Attack. It's official U.S. government. These were sent around. And on the right there, you're saying, what in the world is that? All the schools across the country and a lot of the cities, they all had these air raid sirens. There's one on the left there, up on a pole or on top of the school. And when I grew up, every Saturday at 12 noon, across the United States, they would all test out these. They would all sign. You would hear if 12 o'clock struck, all these air raid warnings would go off. So you know the systems were working good. And when you're in school, we all had to go through these tests. If there was an atomic bomb, what do you do? Well, in the schools, there's no use in running away. So what they do is they instructed you how to go underneath your desk, cover your ears, and if you got stuck in the hallway or in the auditorium, in the gym, whatever, go up against one of the walls without windows and crouch down like the picture over there on the right. And we went through these drills when I was in grammar school every week. Now, in order to finance this war effort now, because we were all mobilizing right there, every Friday we would have what they call the savings bond plans, okay? Savings bond books, and the teacher would hand out all these books, and then you would buy so many stamps every week, paste them in the book, and if you had enough stamps, you could get a United States savings bond and save those. And believe it or not, I have one right here. I didn't finish it, so if you take a look at it, here's a savings bond book, okay? Now when I open it up, you can see I never finished it, so I never got my savings bond. If you open it up, you can see all the different 10 cents for each one of those stamps. All right. Let me show you the reverse side on it. Then what you would do is, and here's some of these other ones that tell you how much money you're making here. Every school had these, you know, and every Friday you had to take a minute right at the start of school after Pledge Allegiance to the flag. The teacher would pass all these out, and maybe I would buy $1. I'd use it when I was, you know, all the kids always did chores, so when I shoveled snow, I got paid. You know, my folks gave me maybe 25 cents or something, and then I would go on every Friday at school and invest it. And I actually, believe it or not, I found these many years later. Here's my first United States savings bond, $25. See, it's made out to me or my mother. I suppose I could still cash it in today. Now, if you go to the next slide, well, okay, how does this work? There's room for 187 10-cent stamps. You know, we do probably, I don't know, maybe $2 worth of stamps every week. And it said, well, if you fill all the pages up to 187 stamps and add $5 in coin, you'd have a total of $18.75 worth of stamps. And if you went to either your post office or your savings bank, they would give you a $25 savings bond. So you made a little bit of money on this, and you also helped the United States government. Now let's go back here. Here's what we're dealing with. These Russian fighters. It's just amazing the capability that they had back then. And once again, the Soviet nuclear submarines. That was the big problem. And also the Soviet ICBMs. That's why these savings bonds for every kid in the United States helped finance the war effort. And this is another MiG-27. These jets were amazing. And this was the most feared bomber that they had, the Soviet, but the Tu-95 with its large atomic payload. Now, where are these Nike sites? Well, did some research, and they were basically located in these the white states here, or it shows the missile. 16 states across the country, and you can see New England is certainly very well represented. And on the right, the first missile they had, actually the first air-to-air missile, or surface-to-air missile, was a Nike Ajax, and they were in all these installations. New England, where are they? Well, if you take a look at this drawing I made, take a look at Massachusetts, and there's the code over here on the left. Green is the number of Nike sites. You can see they're all around the Boston and greater Boston area. And Rhode Island, there's the red states, red sites, and they're all in Rhode Island. And then in the blue, that's Connecticut. You can see they're sort of in the center of the state where Hartford is, and it's sort of down in the coast where Electric Boat is. That's where they all were. They were all ready at that time. And I just want to tell you which towns they were in. Massachusetts, Bedford, Beverly, Burlington, Blue Hills, Milton, that was one site, Cohasset, Hingham, Danvers, Fort Duval, Hull, Needham, Squantum, Quincy, Reading, South Lincoln, Wayland, Rehoboth, and Swansea. In Rhode Island, there were 5 locations: Bristol, Coventry, Foster, Woonsocket, North Kingston, Davisville, North Smithfield, and Foster. In Connecticut, there were 11 sites: Manchester, Portland, Crimewell, New Britain, Plainville, Ansonia, West Haven, Milford, Fairfield, Westport, and Monroe. My father, to begin with, he was stationed in Connecticut at the first Nike site here, Cromwell, and then he moved when they had the different missiles, and we'll cover that in a minute. So originally he was at the Avon Simsbury. So we'll go to the next slide. Now this Ajax, this is a great picture of it. Army National Guard now took over all these sites. The speed is Mach 2.3 times the speed of sound. Range is 30 miles, flight ceiling 13 miles. And this was actually at the time high technology. It was the world's first operational surface-to-air missile. It was operational in 1954. which is 9 years after World War II. And the Nike Ajax site, they have actually divided into 3 operational areas. On the left, the battery control area, where all the radar is. And on the center, this is below ground, the assembly and service area. And then on the right, they would have the launcher area. In the battery control area, or IFC, or the integrated fire control, you would start off on the left with the acquisition radar, which would pick up the site of a missile coming in. Then it would transfer that to the target tracking radar, then to the target ranging radar, which would pick it up, and then separately you would have a missile tracking radar, which is the United States missile, or the Ajax that went up. And I like this picture a lot. There's my father there with his headphone on right in the front. And those other fellows, he was in the Avon Simsbury Nike site. That's where the picture was taken. And that was at the radar set. And you can see all the folks here, very well trained, very well trained. And that's the area where, if all the systems were going okay, they would be in control and would be responsible for launching these missiles. Now, here's a book I found many years after my father passed away. Of course, it's all non-classified. It's over 50 years old. Nike Ajax, Battery Control Area Equipment, Checks and Adjustments. And every day, they would go, the National Guard, there was like 100, an average of 100 at each of those Nike sites. They were manned all three shifts a day. And they would all day long, every day, go through this whole book with all these different tests, just to make sure everything was 100% okay, ready to fire. And see, I took only one page of this. There's quite a few pages, over 100 pages here. And I highlighted on top, energizing the equipment. Now this is up in their radar site. And if you take a look at this, I just circled some of this here. D, energize the target and missile track radars through plate volts. Light the tactical signal sequence through ready to fire. Check that the dead time unit is reading 7 seconds, and operate the fire switch. Of course, it's a test. Page after page of continuous equipment checks, all 3 shifts. And it's a small book. I have it right here. I'll just hold it up here. It's a small manual. And if you open it up, unbelievable. Page after page of all these checks, what to see, which lights stay on, how long did I stay on, what the missile tracking radar calculations. It's really amazing what they had to learn and what they folks had to train for. Missile launcher area. Now, the radar area was usually located on a high mountain or something, and then probably a few miles below that, they would have the missile launcher area. And you can see it was all fenced in. They actually had a double chain link fence around these areas, and at nighttime they would have guard dogs loose that would run inside between these 2 fences to keep everybody out. Everything was top secret. And over on the right there, you can see the Nike Ajax missiles, and they're all ready to fire in a vertical position. And of course, they're all stored underground. It's quite a system. And the assembly and service area, all day long, you can see on the left there, they're all have all their protective gear in, because once again, you've got a lot of radioactivity and equipment there. Now, the Nike Ajax did not have nuclear capability. It was a conventional. And the difference there is one missile, one plane. In other words, if the Soviets sent over a bombing force of 5 planes, you would have to have 5 missiles to take out each plane. And you can see when we get into the better Nike Hercules how much better that is. So this one here, that's it. One shot, one plane. And you can see over on the right there, it's above ground there, and they're doing maintenance work, putting in the propellants and all the chemicals and everything. It was quite an engineering feat, really. And this is a great picture. This is the Avon Simsbury, Connecticut Nike site. And it's hard to say when that was dated, but it looks like when it was first in operation. You can see all the dignitaries and the officers and community executives and people there, and the old cars there in the parking lot. And of course, they had open house on certain areas that you could see everything, and so that everyone could see that we are prepared in Connecticut on this Avon Simsbury Nike Ajax site. And really interesting here. I have a couple of patches here from my father that this is the Air Defense, U.S. Army Air Defense patch over here in the bright red. This is that same patch with the camouflage type of patch. That's the original ones that he had. And his rank, you're asking, he started off as, we're going to cover this too, what they call specialists, because they're all technicians. This happens to be a Spec 5. So once again, it's Dave Norton from Discovering New England History. We're going to continue on with the Nike sites in New England. Have a good evening.